Lunchtime webinar, where today we're going to be speaking about the role of innovation in the transition towards a circular economy. So we've got three fantastic speakers who you'll hear from shortly. My name is Fiona Charnley. I'm a Professor of Circular Innovation at the University of Exeter and co-director of the Circular Economy Hub, which is part of the NICER programme funded by UKRI. So just a couple of notes about housekeeping. If you could keep your microphones on mute while our speakers are presenting, but then there will be time for Q&A after, so please do then feel free to either raise your hand and come in and ask your question on the mic, which would be great, or otherwise, if you want to stay off camera, please do pop your questions in the chat and we'll get to the questions then. The webinar is being recorded and is going to be made available on the C-Hub website afterwards. So if you want to share it with any colleagues, please do so. And also, if you do not wish to be included in the recording, please keep your cameras off. But as I said, if you don't mind being included, it would be great to see your faces and come and have a discussion after our speakers have finished presenting. So we've got, as I said, three fantastic speakers. They'll be speaking for approximately 10 minutes, and then we will have a good amount of time at the end for some discussion and Q&A before we wrap up by 1 o'clock. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker, who is Barry Wadlove. From Electrolux. So Barry is Head of Circular Economy and Partnerships at Electrolux, where he's responsible for supporting partnerships and also leading new work to develop Electrolux circular economy approach and priorities. And Barry has got over 30 years experience of working in design, innovation and the circular economy with lots of different brands. And is here today to share his experiences with us. So thanks, Barry, and I'll hand over to you.
Thanks. Great. Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Nice to be here, and good afternoon, everyone. It is just about afternoon in the UK. I'm going to try and share my slides. I don't use Zoom a lot, so please forgive me if I don't get this quite right, but let's see. So if I switch to full screen, does that go full screen for you?
No, we can see your notes.
Okay.
Or the presenter view.
Why has it done that? That's kind of frustrating because it doesn't just jump back out again. Bear with me. So how do I do that then? Maybe I need to. That's a little strange.
You go to slideshow, you can disable presenter view, Barry. With the tab at the top says slideshow.
Slideshow.
And if you should be able to get rid of
play.
Not.
Oh, okay.
Different option.
If you go on slideshow, just launch it again, and then at the top you can just flick a button to switch displays. It says swap displays just above your cursor.
Did that work? No.
Just click swap displays.
Oh.
Go on, slideshow.
If you go back into presenter mode, Barry, so if you share, play from start.
Yeah, if I do that, I can't see anything. It just fills the whole screen.
Oh.
So it's fine if it's working, but it's not. I'm sorry about this. The joy of running a Mac with Windows software. Can you see this okay if I run it from here?
I can see it okay.
Yeah, we can.
It might work better from that
view. Okay, let's do that.
Thanks all for your combined help.
So yeah, quick introduction to myself. As Fiona said, I work at Electrolux. We're a major appliance company. We have brands. You probably know AEG better these days. That's typically what you see in stores in the UK, but also Electrolux and Frigidaire in the US, and many other brands globally. As Fiona said, I've worked for a lot of different companies over the years, and most of my career has been in design and innovation. And really in the last 10 years, I've been focusing on sustainability and circular economy. So we manufacture all kinds of products, everything from, premium built-in ovens and wine chillers like the one you see here, right down to the little robotic vacuum cleaner that comes and cleans up after you've dropped your crumbs on the floor. We are in all 120 markets globally, so a lot of different countries with a lot of different brands. So we have a comprehensive sustainability strategy with 9 goals, and you can see these goals laid out here. There are 3 goals per pillar, and we have these 3 pillars: better company, better solutions, and better living. Better company is really about our facilities, our people, what we do for sustainability in our own operations. Better solutions is about the technologies and the products we create and the technologies that we employ. So this is really about how we use sustainability and what we're doing. And then better living is really about the consumer view. So what's the consumer view of sustainability in relation to our product categories that we're having? So for example, if you're in the kitchen, then our focus is really trying to make healthy and sustainable eating the preferred choice. So enabling a shift to more sustainable food. And equally, we might be talking about, washing machines and tumble dryers. And there it's about making clothes last twice as long with half of the environmental impact, just as a couple of examples. And all of these 9 goals are underpinned by the UN SDGs and our climate targets. And overall, this creates quite a comprehensive sustainability strategy for the business, which is very much led by the whole executive team. It's very well adopted amongst all of our business leaders. So coming to circular economy specifically, this is a diagram that I like to use because it's just so simple. It's from a paper by Konietzko, Bocken, and Hultink. And I just think it's really simple to understand. Circular economy for us is really about using less, using things for longer, and using things again, and regenerating wherever we can. And if you relate that to our business, if you take those, let's see these top 3 areas. The first one, use less, is really about material input. It's about the choices that we make in the materials that we use, the amount of material that we use in each of our products. So it's about simplifying our designs. It's about using more recycled materials wherever we can. It's about employing recycled materials in our packaging, for example, and doing work to create new sustainable materials. So a lot of our design team, our color, material, and finish experts, our materials experts, are doing a lot of work to collaborate with new material formulations and bring those to our products. And then the top one here is really about use longer. And I think really this is the most important one for Electrolux and its brands. We want to create products that are high quality, reliable, efficient, and last a really long time. And we are exploring many different business models in circularity that also extend that life by encouraging reuse, refurbishment. So that might evidence itself as supporting maintenance. You know, we're creating new apps that help people to understand how to maintain their appliances and what to do if something isn't quite right, how to fix it. Design for durability in terms of not only the quality of the materials, but also the repairability and extending the warranty. Product as a service is a business model that we're exploring in multiple ways in terms of subscriptions and leasing. Spare parts and service are critical to keeping those products going. Design for repair and refurbishment, as I said, particularly in supporting product as a service, refurbishment is becoming a really interesting topic for us that we're developing. And then when we come to use again, it's really at the point where the product has truly broken, because obviously if it's fixable, then it stays within this use longer area. But if it isn't fixable, if it is truly end of life, then it becomes about, okay, end of life collection, parts harvesting. Can we harvest the batteries? Can we harvest the motors or the controls? And design for recycling. So we have some interesting collaborations around how to get the best from our materials at the end of life. And just continuing to focus for a while on this use longer phase. For the company, this has created kind of a shift in terms of how our products are designed. And I think this development of the design profession is evidenced in many different businesses. But what it means for Electrolux is that, you know, traditionally we've been a very product-focused business. We have a great design organization and some great innovation around the product and the product technologies. And of course, we still have this traditional product team that focuses on the new products that we're launching and the innovations that we're bringing to market. But when you start to look at all of the opportunity that lies in these circular economy business models, then it really creates a lot of evidence that we need to grow this service and UX design side of the business. Because whilst we have a traditional product team, we also have, and this is the area that's really growing, is the kind of product in use team where, you know, on the product side, yes, they want to create attractive and efficient, high quality products. But on the product in use team, we want to create an enduring brand with effortless service, with effortless support. And that might take many forms for different consumers. Some consumers want to repair something themselves. Other consumers would like to have it done for them, or would like, you know, easy instructions on how to do that. And so all of the innovation on this side of the business is about enabling an easy and enjoyable brand experience where it doesn't matter whether you're, you know, taking advice on your phone or taking, you know, on your mobile or talking to someone at Electrolux or working with a local repair company. This is all about creating a really good brand experience for our Electrolux consumers. And it's a very different timeline and focus, and there are very different consumer needs in this space to what you might traditionally think of in product design. And an example of that is our At Ease service. So this is an appliance subscription service that we actually launched this year. We've had previous product as a service offerings, you know, an example being the robotic vacuum cleaner, but where it was kind of pay per meter squared vacuumed. But now we have an appliance subscription where we have multiple different products on offer, and people can choose whether they rent a new product or a refurbished product, and they can choose the amount of time that they're going to rent that product for. Are they going to subscribe to that service for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years? It gives them that flexibility, and it means that not only can they choose a slightly cheaper product because it's a refurbished product versus a new product, or they can have confidence that when they send that product back, it will be refurbished and used again. And this is a really interesting example of how our circular economy business models are growing. I don't know how I'm doing for time. I need to whiz on, don't I? So wicked problems. We all know that innovation is complex for sustainability. And part of the way that Electrolux deals with that complexity is to really work in 3 horizons. The traditional product innovation horizon is Horizon 1, where it's really focused on the current innovation portfolio and the current products that we sell. If we look over here at Horizon 3, this is about foresight. And if you think of traditional foresight as being, a 10-year view, then we do a lot of system explorations, I would say, really comprehensive explorations around, for example, the topic of sustainable food or the subject of clothing care. And we talk to a lot of different players in the subject of clothing or the subject of food. It could be food manufacturers, food retailers, dietitians, many different people, in order to explore those things on a 10-year horizon. But in circular economy, the area that I work mostly in is in Horizon 2, where it's about stretching the existing business and collaborating with different organizations to understand a different perspective. So the example I'm going to give to you today is of our collaborations with a recycler, Stena, who are a Nordic recycling company. And Stena, really, the beauty of this is that Electrolux and Stena are 2 very different companies, but we are working at opposite ends of a very big system. And so Electrolux has the producer view. Typically when we're thinking about material choices or maintenance or recycling or design for repair, we're coming at it from the beginning, from how might we manufacture this? How might our service engineers deal with this repair? Whereas Stena is looking from the very opposite end of the system. They see our products at the very end of life, when they've become waste, or they've become waste with the potential to be something else other than waste. And so when they look at our material choices and the kind of decisions that we're making around these things, then they see things quite differently. And in collaborating together, we're really kind of on a learning journey where we're trying to understand their perspective of the materials that they're ending up with, and we try and redesign our products to make them more suitable for recycling. So examples of the challenges that we face together might be the challenge of color in terms of getting just the right white or finding ways for consumers to accept purity or flex in their materials. And an example of how we have collaborated together on recyclability is this 90% recyclable vacuum cleaner. So a couple of years back, we set our design teams in both companies a challenge to collaborate together to create 100% recyclable vacuum cleaner. Well, it was a tough challenge, but we got to 90%, and we created a prototype of a vacuum cleaner where 90% of the parts were recyclable. And we've done other collaborations with Stena too, where having this benefit of the recycler perspective really helps our innovation programs. So that's it from me. Over to you. I will stop sharing.
Brilliant. Thanks, Barry. That was a really interesting presentation, and great to see how you're taking that whole systems perspective kind of in the way that you're looking at food, for example, as opposed to just a product perspective. And I think in terms of innovation, it's really useful to get people thinking in that way, and particularly bringing together different partners and different stakeholders with that kind of more longer term perspective. Yeah, really great. So there's already a question in the chat, but we're going to leave our questions until we've heard from all three speakers. But if you do have any questions for Barry, please do note them down and ask them at the end or put them in the chat. So we're now going to go on to our next speaker, Marco Segovia. So Marco is a sustainability and circular economy expert, and he has over 7 years of experience working in the area of circular innovation in various parts of the world. And currently his role is project director at Circular Change, and he's going to talk to us about some of the work that he's been doing with regard to circular innovation. So over to you, Marco.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to share my slides. I just want to confirmation if you can see them?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Perfect. So thank you, first of all, for inviting us for Circular Change here to this. We're tackling a very important topic here today. For those of us who don't know, for those of you who don't know us, we are a non-profit organization. We're based in Slovenia, but most of our work is done internationally. And as our name says, Circular Change, so we work with different fields of the circular economy. And our history, let's say, in terms of, as we call it, our journey on the bumpy road, because at the beginning, the circular economy some years ago was not so mainstream. Well, our first focus was to bring this topic more into mainstream by organizing Circular Change conferences. Why? Because we saw the value of knowledge transfer, knowledge exchange, best practices, because there were things that needed to change. And when we talk about innovation, change is important, right? After all that, we have developed to work in different topics, different projects of the circular economy across Europe and outside. But most of all, we work with, let's say, expertise support that is provided to stakeholders, education, circular diplomacy, which is one of the new hot topics in Europe, and then also the stakeholder engagement and communication that comes with it. But how do we address circular innovation? First of all, we're not a manufacturer. Let's say electricals is a great example. We don't do, let's say, technical or technological innovation in that sense, but we work more in the, let's say, non-technical side with regarding to social innovation, the innovation in ecosystems regarding circular economy. So we work with stakeholder ecosystems like circular economy platforms, circular economy hubs, and the orchestration of this, as well as providing, then we have also the business innovation in terms of business models. And why are we going? Why are we going on this direction? Is because, as it was said in the earlier presentation, so we're dealing with a systemic transition here in terms of circular economy, right? So we need to address the system, and so in the system we have different parts, different stakeholders. And that's what we have been doing, working with different stakeholders, those being public, private, policymakers, businesses, researchers, and civil society and citizens also, working to develop on one side, so working on two sides. On one side, trying to help develop in some countries and region the backbone that can be a strategy or a national roadmap that can then fall in a cascade and facilitate the circular economy transition. On the other side is the co-creation of circular solutions here you see the word multi-stakeholders, because we just don't work with businesses, but we work also with whoever may be identified as the right stakeholder to carry on a certain circular transformation. And as I was saying, talking about stakeholders, so we have been working on the development of circular economy hubs. We have helped and fostered the development of different circular economy hubs across Europe. And also our CEO is co-chair of the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, and that's where we're pushing now this topic about circular diplomacy and network governance, which I will talk right now. And let's say a circular economy, it's all about partnerships, right? Because one company, one business, one stakeholder, even one country can be circular in its own. We need collaboration, right? And we need co-creation. That is the right word. So we're now part of this network of circular economy hubs, circular economy platforms. We're collaborating with these or with this, let's say, objective of helping, supporting, connecting stakeholders, because then we have also some key partnerships helping on this, but there is an important role of circular ecosystems in innovation, because we always say that innovation can't happen, or let's say it's hindered by the absence of connection, right? So when we are working with these ecosystems, we're working with stakeholders. What often is putting, what often we find as barriers and obstacles for innovation to happen, whether it's technical or non-technical innovation, it's of course then silos thinking, because I'm thinking only about myself and not about the bigger picture, the bigger and the system. But it's understanding, as we saw in the example of electrical looks, where am I, what resources do I need? And so in terms of what resources, it's not only material resources, but skills, people, stakeholders, right? All this considering in terms of circularity resources. And so it's important to really map well the stakeholders, and that's what we are doing. Really identify who are the stakeholders and how, and the circular economy potentials that can be brought forward. And of course, as I was saying, we need this connection, and these ways, development of these circular economy hubs, circular economy platforms or ecosystems are important, because they give us this system view, this interdisciplinarity that it's needed. It's fertile ground for innovation, right? And facilitates process like industrial symbiosis, but also what it's often underlooked in some cases, especially in in Central and Southern Europe, this lack of that there is this let's say electrode is a good example. They're seeing the whole value chain, but often it's hindering the windows. There's not value chain collaboration or cross value chain collaboration. So this is the area that we're working, and so facilitating the orchestration of these ecosystems. And this is also through this new concept called network governance, developed by Professor Jacqueline Kramer, who is in our honorary council. And when we talk about it, we know all what is public top-down governance, but network governance is the development of bottom-up processes carried down by stakeholders, multi-stakeholders in that sense, because we all need this perspective, also these resources, also different levels of power, different levels of implementation. And we're carrying out forward the role, also through the European Circular Economy Stakeholder Platform, of transition brokers, and the role that this kind of person or this kind of professional can have in facilitating circular innovation and circular economy transition in general. We're looking forward to actually, if possible, also certify this kind of position, this kind of professionality, because we need the stakeholders that are part of the ecosystem. But then often is, which language do these stakeholders speak? Do they speak the same language? And often, even if they are in the same environment, the same system, there is this lack of connection, and there is needed this orchestration carried down by these transition brokers. And we're working with this, identifying who are these transition brokers across Europe, which can build upscale circular initiatives and develop front runners, connect front runners, aligned and orchestrate, but also create the necessary preconditions for innovation, right, in a circular ecosystem. And this also goes with the logic of, rather than the linear logic of having more, let's say, moving more towards collaboration and co-creation, rather than this, where more partners can grow all together in an ecosystem, in a circular ecosystem with circular synergies. That would be it from my side. I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Marco. Really fascinating to hear from a different stakeholder, so an NGO perspective compared to that manufacturer's perspective. And it always, I guess, surprises me kind of how many different roles and different stakeholders are required for the transition towards a circular economy. And it's really great to see kind of those different points of view and different perspectives. And we're now going to go on to a third perspective from my colleague, Professor Alan Alexander, who's going to talk to us about some of the work he's doing in the area of circular innovation. So I think, Alan, we have your slides up already, so over to you.
Thanks very much. Now I've got a little box appeared on the bottom of my screen that says Control Imogen Slides. So let's see whether that works, shall we? If not, I might have to crowdsource some advice, as happened earlier on. Thanks very much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to come along and talk to you. And I think I've been trying to come along for a number of these webinars to speak, but for one reason or other, haven't managed it. So thank you. I guess my brief was to talk a little bit about the work that I've been doing, trying to understand how organizations are transitioning. And I don't have a particular focus or a particular approach, although I am always drawn much towards the more technical side of transitions than perhaps some of the social side of transitions. But I've been working in this landscape now for approximately 8 years. And on that journey, I've been kind of wrestling with a number of questions in terms of how do both social networks or kind of grassroots organizations or community groups harness collective innovation. I've also been looking at kind of small and medium-sized enterprises, micro business, nascent entrepreneurs to understand how they're either transitioning or are indeed born circular. And then relatively recently, I've been kind of interested in how organizations search for new ideas and how multinationals search in what is a very contested space for circular inspiration. So I'm going to talk very quickly about a couple of different models that I've used over the years to help, more often than not, help me understand what I'm seeing in terms of organizations transitioning or how we can create a collective narrative. So let me see if I can move the slide on. Oh, there we go. So early on, I was wrestling with trying to make sense of the different narratives that were coming at me in the circular economy space. And I think one of the things that became evident to me was that there was this kind of tension between traditional organizations who were constructed in a particular way, as we would expect them to be, that created returns predominantly for their shareholders. And maybe we were seeing the evolution of these organizations or the transition of these organizations to pay much more attention to the pressure from their wider stakeholder groups, or indeed to change their products to influence these or to impress these stakeholders. And also there was a narrative coming forwards around the idea that the innovation research for many years had looked at things from an exploitative approach in terms of exploiting resources or exploiting customer base or particular markets. But I could see a new narrative evolving around kind of more restorative practices. So I started to try and make sense of this space. And obviously at the time we'd gone into lockdown, and professor colleague from the Stockholm School of Economics launched a 3,500 data point survey to try and understand which organizations were succeeding and retaining their customers and managing their supply chains effectively in this kind of COVID landscape. And he came about this idea that customers, it's not particularly revolutionary, but he came across this idea that customers were happy to supply and switch and were very fast to move their loyalties unless the organizations were presenting this deep, meaningful proposition that wrapped their traditional value propositions. So we saw the stress and strains in COVID kind of doubling down on this kind of pressure. So I started to try and think about the sorts of organizations we were seeing coming forwards and the products and services they were developing, either under a sustainability or responsible innovation kind of banner, or rapid growth, but rapid growth in an environment where they were creating kind of restorative impacts to our societies. So that's kind of, I guess, one of the early things I was trying to understand was whether we were in a position where organizations could bring forwards products and services that had embedded meaning, and meaning that also related to the organizations and how customers felt about them, and how they could bring forward offerings that were more balanced in terms of societal contribution and environmental contribution, and obviously an economic return. And I think that's the real big challenge, as I see it still, is trying to understand those three dimensions and how we might realistically move forwards to start to get some parity across the restorative responses to those three dimensions. I think people that know me are a little bit bored with me wheeling this kind of old 1980s, 1990s resource-based view forwards. But as I started to work with organizations more and more, I could see that they were under significant pressure, and are still under significant pressure to make sense of how they're managing their resources, which is why, from a circular economy perspective, I was able to take my previous research and map it into this space. So very much operating as a practitioner, helping organizations understand the way that they would change, I've been using the kind of the tenets of innovation in terms of developing the innovation strategy, working through the processes within an organization that allow you to develop new products and services, thinking about how organizations learn and how they're linked and connected, and how their attitude towards innovation, and in this example, circular innovation, really are critical enablers to allow them to move through what I might refer to as kind of the traditional innovation management capability set, which we're now thinking perhaps more in terms of circular innovation capability sets. And in terms of the way that we spend a lot of time trying to help organizations, it is to start off with this kind of resource-based view, and to help organizations think through the physical, the financial, and the labor resources that they take into their organization to create their value add. And then also help them to understand some of the kind of the tenets of what circular innovations may or may not be. And Barry's elegantly pointed out at Electrolux that they're moving much more to longer life cycles, and also brought forward pragmatic examples of how they're starting to engage more in the design for end of life. And interestingly, one of the questions that popped up during Barry's discussion, which maybe we'll come back to in the questions, was how is Electrolux considering this kind of regenerative potential? Also, quite often we spend a lot of time working with businesses thinking about their transformational resources and how they use their transformational resources, and how they might select alternative resources in terms of renewable heat, renewable energy, clean energy, cycled water sources, those sorts of things. So that's just a really simple model that I quite often unpack with a business that's thinking through the idea of circularity, to try to anchor the message in things that they really pay attention to, and things that they're used to funding and having as a high priority in their managerial landscape. In doing that, I've worked with a number of different colleagues to start to try to tackle some of the emerging or the immediate problems that businesses face, having gone through an elementary evaluation of what they do. They're suddenly then kind of faced with this transition opportunity to circularity, and we see a significant body of research popping up at the moment, making the argument that actually organizations are paralyzed by the sheer enormity of this kind of circular challenge. And whilst they were able to understand maybe some of the slightly less complex elements around the sustainability challenge, when we take them to the circular economy landscape, they ask a number of questions to try and resolve this paralysis. And so one of the questions that we regularly get asked is it better to think about changing our existing organization and all the products and services that we currently have, or the operational processes or the activities that we undertake? Or is it safer or better to go down a kind of do we change our immediate to develop new product and service offerings? So do we take an innovation focus in the way that we change, or do we take an organizational focus in the way that we change? And if we do that, how might we think through different steps in those respective approaches? Now, what we know from a practical basis, and no doubt what Barry will tell us if this turns up as a question, is that if you move down the innovation landscape pretty quickly, you end up bumping into the organizational aspects. And if you move down the organizational aspect, you quite quickly bump into the innovation element. So then they're not mutually exclusive destinations by any stretch of the imagination, but they do provide an organization with a simple starting point. So if they're looking to create a pilot, they have a little bit of resource available to launch a new product and a new service. They can control the landscape and the environment around that new product and service and build that as a circular offering while holding their existing organization constant, and not trying to change their processes and activities in that organization. Or equally, they're fully focused on changing their existing organization, but are happy with the products and services they currently offer. So it gives us an opportunity. And as I said, with colleagues, we've developed a number of tools and guides. I take no credit for the Circular Business Model Design Guide. That's all entirely Fiona, and I've just pinched it to put it on my slide because it does allow organizations to adopt an organizational focus and think through like a more holistic approach to changing their organization. We have some simple tools around the idea of an innovation fitness test and how you might then think that through in terms of a circular innovation analysis and look at organizations' footprints. And then really one of my major contributions, hopefully in this space, is to understand how organizations can move towards circularity through the medium of much more radical innovations that they haven't thought of yet, maybe akin to Barry's Horizon, the extent of Horizon 2, the edges of Horizon 2, possibly Horizon 3, definitely in periphery markets or in transformational markets that they haven't looked at, and how they might then go about trying to develop those to keep them safe in their early phases before their mainstream organization attacks them. So my final slide is hopefully a bit of a summary. Oh, there we go. Is a bit of a summary of the approaches that we're taking in terms of trying to help organizations to not be put off by the enormity of the circular economy challenge and not go into the paralysis that a number of my colleagues are writing about at the moment as they evaluate organizations. And so taking a kind of a stepwise approach to helping organizations through some early decisions that we've found as quite useful. I think the good news in terms of circular innovations from my perspective is that the scope for innovation in this landscape is enormous. And there are a whole raft of directions that we know from our innovation studies in terms of product or process, in terms of changing the stories and the marketing spin on activities, or entirely shifting the business models. We can explore a huge space with organizations under the kind of the innovation agenda that then allows us to add in the core tenets of circularity to help them move on that. Every day we regularly also bump into this illusion that circular economy is all about waste, and so that's really one of the challenges that I see moving forwards as a sector for us, is to get the narrative away from circular economy equals waste into circular economy being this significantly larger range of activities that can change both an organization or the products and services it sells. That's me, Fiona.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Alan. Fantastic. And I think one of the key things that you've reminded me of is that sometimes circular economy transitions can feel very overwhelming and complex. And even though they are, there's a lot that we can take from existing processes, kind of particularly in innovation and innovation management, which we've been doing for a long time. There's a lot of lessons that we can learn and bring forward. So fantastic. So now going to move over to questions. So there's been a few questions in the chat, which I will get to, but please, if you do have a question, feel free to raise your hand and come in and ask it. But we'll start from the top. And Mayank has put a question to Barry, quite a simple question, but maybe not a simple answer, around what strategies are in the regenerate section of your circular economy diagram.
Yeah, that's a challenging one, isn't it? That bottom one. But I think that we are starting to have clear ideas of what we can do in that space. So at the moment, I would say that the activities in Regenerate relate to one of two things. Firstly, they relate to materiality. So we are doing work with Steno, who I mentioned, and others to explore how we can be more deliberate about having appliance waste, appliance materials, appliance plastics from end of life be formulated into new plastics that then get reused in appliances. So if you think about the recycled plastics market, an awful lot of the recycled plastics that we buy, we just receive a recycled plastic formulation and we don't have a clear idea of where those various ingredients have come from. They come from a manufacturer who's developed that recycled plastic. What we're trying to do is be more deliberate in working with end-of-life partners to only focus on or primarily focus on plastics from appliance waste streams, which means that in theory, we might be able to drive towards cleaner plastics that are better suited to our uses. So obviously one of the challenges of appliance plastics is the hygiene factor, that quite a lot of our plastics are in food contact, and therefore we have to protect the safety of the plastic. So what we're trying to do is work with recyclers to directly develop formulations from appliance waste. And that I think can be considered as Regenerate, because it is taking something from us that goes full loop and then comes back to us. And then the other way to look at Regenerate is biodiversity. So, you know, you've got the technical cycle and the natural cycle. And I think when I'm referring to the Ellen MacArthur butterfly diagram here, and if you think about the biocycle, then there are many different places where Electrolux can be more proactive in encouraging biodiversity. So that's about looking at the countries that we operate in, the facilities that we have in those countries, where we use natural materials. How are we ensuring that we are regenerating those natural materials? Obviously, a lot of our materials are not natural, but we do use some wood in some ways, and that there are, you know, there's water. So there are clear materials or services where biodiversity is going to be a big focus in the future, and I see that growing. For me, that fits well with the idea of Regenerate, and it covers both the technical and the biological cycle.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. I'd agree, and I think there's a lot of activity starting to happen, kind of in the biomaterials and bioinnovation space. Lots of really exciting companies and startups working in that area. The next question is from Kevin, and I can see you on your camera, Kevin. So I wondered if you wanted to come in and ask it, directed at Barry, but I think also Marco and Alan might have something to say about this as well.
Yeah, I can do it. I was interested in the product life cycle kind of habit that consumer products are in, of constantly bringing out a new version, which makes the old version seem old. And when you come to repair it, it's really hard to find the right parts because the version keeps changing over and over again. I just wonder if you're taking that into account in there.
Yeah, I do. I think that we are seeing a move towards longer life cycles. I'm not sure if you're aware, but there is new legislation in development in the EU around commercial durability guarantees. So there is going to be more pressure in future on manufacturers to offer a promise of additional life beyond the initial guarantee period. And I think that's, that's healthy pressure to receive in terms of legislation, because I think it is helping companies like ourselves to wake up to the opportunity of extending life. And I do think that it really helps us to understand that, these days it's much more about protecting our brand legacy. So if we can make products last longer and we can help people to repair them, or help them to upgrade, potentially over the air upgrades instead of software becoming obsolete, then I think that only helps our brand. And if we create a reason for somebody to have to stop using our product, that's a problem for us. That's not just a problem for them. That's very much a problem for us. So I think as a brand, we're going to have to become more oriented towards longer life cycles.
Great, thank you. Alan or Marco, feel free to jump in, but there are some other questions that perhaps we should carry on. There's quite a few questions. So I'm going to jump down the list a bit to Tala, who's asked a question for both Marco and Alan. You've mentioned a circular economy can be paralyzing to begin working towards. Could you give any advice of how to overcome the first step of difficulty, and any examples of organizations who have been able to overcome this first step?
To who?
Either yourself or Marco.
Okay. So I think hopefully one of the messages that came out, but perhaps it didn't, was organizations are very used to managing their own resources. It's fundamentally what an organization does. So if I can position this transition to circular economy, as I did in that second or third slide, as a resource-based view, I'm not fighting against something that organizations aren't used to paying significant attention to. So that's kind of my first bit of advice, is kind of take it to the things that they care about the most and are used to spending the most amount of money managing. And then try to give a kind of a stepwise approach, where the initial step doesn't have to be as challenging. And that's why organizations have, over the last kind of 100 years, got used to the idea that a new product or a new service in one way or another could be something that they can do outside of their normal organizational operations. And some companies hide it. Some companies put it in what we might call skunk works models. Some companies put it in wholly owned subsidiaries in order to keep it a long way away from their core organization. And then they can experiment, they can pilot, they can bring these products and services, and they can develop some hypotheses with potential markets to see whether there's strong signals for a desire for people to want circular products and services. So that would be my second piece of advice was if organizations are at all worried about the impact it's going to have on their overall business, then it's perfectly acceptable. We've seen lots of organizations who think, right, okay, we'll just bring one new thing forwards and we'll see if it locks and see if it gains market traction. And if it does, maybe the next time we're going to bring something forward, we'll make it a bit more circular as well.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Alan. Marco, did you have any response to that question?
Yes, so yeah, I see the question here, and I see this word paralyzing, which we have seen this in some businesses as well, in some stakeholders, because they don't know what to do or what is the best, let's say, way forward. So I agree with what Alan has said, and I would add that let's say there are different ways to become circular, different circular economy strategies or practices that can be applied. The point would be then understanding, we always say that understanding then your ecosystem, understanding where you can then, of course, have an impact with this circular economy strategy in terms of, okay, which, for example, how much resource or material are you targeting? but also what is doable for you at the moment, right? So then having these two type of parameters in mind, and then starting from something, it can start from. We said that it's not just the recycling, but it can start from there. So the point is that circular, let's say, transition from a business, linear business to circular business is a journey. It's gradual, and it should be taken step by step. And because of course I can make my whole business circular, but it takes I would break it break it into parts. And the other thing, if you find it paralyzing, often it's this not work alone, because this is what we have seen. If you don't be afraid to work alone, to work with someone else.
Yeah, great. Really, really important piece of advice.
Perhaps I could add a build here as well,
Yeah,
Fiona.
please jump.
Kind of responding to some of the other chat that's going on. From my position sitting within a company, I see this transition from linear to circular as partly being about organizational change management. So it's not just about design and innovation, creating good ideas that are enticing to the business. It's as much about embedding circular thinking across the whole organization and finding key stakeholders in different parts of the business, because there are so many different parts of the business that are required to deliver kind of a more system-oriented approach. So it's as much about gradually embedding learning into the organization as it is about just coming up with nice ideas. And really, it's kind of an evolution. You know, in the biological sense, it's like as people are learning and applying new thinking, the business actually evolves itself. It starts to change because people start to see the comparability in the various ideas that are happening around the organization. And similarly, we need to do that same kind of stakeholder engagement outside the business. So we also need to work in that way with our partners, educating our partners and getting them on board with where we want to go. And then equally, it's also about consumer research, where we get a sense of where consumer thinking is moving, because that's also evolving as we're evolving. So I like to think of it as a positive evolution. And one of the big jobs that I do now is really more about how to change the organization. So how can I influence the organization? And interestingly, it's kind of, there are other subjects that are trying to do this also. You can imagine that digital technologies are also trying to create a process of change management within the organization towards more digital ways of working. And actually the two kind of overlap. So the use of digital tools also overlaps with the need for a more system-oriented approach. So they do actually support each other and start to resonate. So it's kind of interesting how it's changing the way we do business.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, really important point. And unfortunately, we're going to have to end on that point, although there are still lots of questions in the chat. And Marco, thank you very much for typing some responses. But I wonder, Barry and Alan, if we share these questions with you, it might be that you could provide some responses, and then we can certainly share those responses on the Hub website when we upload the recording of the webinar, if that's okay, because it would be a shame not to get to them. So thank you ever so much for joining us today for the this CE Hub webinar. Thank you very much to our three speakers who all have offered really insightful perspectives on circular innovation and lots of topics that we could carry on talking about. If you want to find out more about the Hub or the NICER program, please do visit our website. We have upcoming webinars. Also, if there are other topics that you would like us to cover, please do let us know and we will try to cover those. But I think that's all that's left for me to say, other than, Alan, I thought you were going to do a bigger plug for our book, so I'm going to take the opportunity to. There is, oh, you can't see it because of my background. I put it in front of my face. So we've recently published the handbook for the Circular Economy, which brings together over 80 authors to talk about transition towards the circular economy, including 30 case studies from different businesses who are implementing circular innovation in practice. So I'm sure you've all read it and got a copy, but if not, I'd highly recommend it. Good Christmas present too. But really lovely to see you all. Hope to see you again at our next webinar. Take care. Thank you very much.